I spent too much money to go to the CDR Bracket Finals at MOKAN Dragway and kept making the same dumb mistake over and over. I turned on the red light and took myself out of competition 6 times in 8 passes. I want to help you not make the same mistake I did. I thought I could fix it by fixing myself, but turns out the problem was actually with the car. Now, the root cause of the problem is I used to race a lot at 4,200 feet in elevation. Now that I'm down here at 700 feet, the car's making a lot more power and it's reacting a lot quicker. And what that means is with the car reacting faster, the rollout, or the time that it takes the car to leave the stage beams, is substantially shorter than it used to be. And given that it's substantially shorter, I've been going red because no matter how much I try and lay back and relax on the reaction time, I can't make it work for me. All right, and if you're unfamiliar with the concept of rollout, we're going to be using this RC car and the pre-stage and stage beams. Yes, they're pencils, but use your imagination for a moment. So basically, as your car rolls into the beams, as you trigger the stage beam, as the wheel blocks the light, the photo cell on the far side, when the tree comes down, you want to be on the gas on that third yellow, so that way your car has time to react and leave the stage beams. But rollout is the time that it takes the tire to go all the way through and past the stage beam. And believe it or not, there's actually quite a few things that you can do to slow down or speed up the rollout of your car. This includes things like front shock settings, front tire pressure, rear tire pressure, and even tire size. Yes, I can't count there for a moment, but even tire size can have an impact on the rollout of your vehicle. So I kept going red over and over and over at MOKAN, and I didn't even take any of these into consideration. This isn't just a one race thing. This has been a problem for over 2 years. So I want to start off by saying that all of these assumptions are based off of my mid-12 second car, which has a roughly 1.70 60 foot time. So these are all ballpark figures and actually a little bit hard to measure, but these are some assumptions that I actually used. I used AI to figure this out because it can do the math and some of these things way quicker and more consistently than I can. Now, I've compiled a list of all the things that I could or should have done and roughly how much time that would have impacted my reaction time. And I've put all that into a list. Check the description for that list to see if this is something that could benefit you. None of these things is that dramatic or would have that much of a change. We're talking thousandths to 10,000ths of a second at a time. But if I had taken the time to actually work with the car as opposed to trying to fix me and relax, there's a good chance I would have turned on a lot more wind lights than the big old goose egg number of wind lights that I did. The first thing I should have done is adjusted the shocks to slow down the extension of the shock. That would have an effect on the reaction time by, 5-ish thousandths of a second, but any change is worthwhile in this instance where I was going very red. So by tightening the extension of the shocks means that if the car was even slightly prone to wheeling out of the stage beam, tightening up the extension was going to keep it rolling through the beams as opposed to popping out. So in the stage beam, you want the car to roll through the beam. And if it's coming out vertically, that can take a lot less time to come up vertically than it can to roll through the beam. So that means about 5,000ths of a second could have been saved if I had just tightened the front shocks up just a little bit. The second thing I should have done that would have had some good effect is lowering the front tire pressure. How the heck does that work? Well, the answer is actually kind of simple because the tire goes from round to kind of more D-shaped. It puts a larger flat spot on the ground. So with the tire as it sits in its nice round shape, it only has so much rollout. But if you lower the pressure, it tends to squish down a little bit. And this is an exaggeration, of course. And that squish provides more time in the stage beam as the tire rolls out. Now, I do want to put a big old asterisk on some of these adjustments because you need to make sure the track conditions can sustain this kind of a change. Example, if you're on the very edge of wheel spin as it is and getting weight transferred, tightening up the shocks may have an adverse effect on that. But let's just assume for half a second that you do have a little bit of latitude. You've got some ability to adjust the car to the track, and the track can handle the adjustments that you're going to be putting to it. This kind of assumes that you're not on the absolute ragged edge of adhesion. This next one was told to me by my carburetor builder, and it's like, no kidding, that really does work. Modifying or adjusting the rear tire pressure, especially in a bias ply slick car, can have an effect on the reaction time. Let's say you lower the tire pressure on, what would be considered a totally acceptable tire pressure. You're going from, I'm going to throw out numbers, 15 pounds to 14 pounds. What that can do, assuming the track can hold it, is it induces a little bit more wrap. As the rim spins and the tire is allowed to wrinkle a little bit further, that actually slows down the reaction of the car just a little bit. Now, where I was at MOKAN, it was kind of a little bit questionable where I was at, and I honestly believe that slowing down the reaction time with the rear tire pressure would have been detrimental to the car's performance and consistency on the track. That's one of those changes that you need to make sure that the track can handle, the car can handle, and be safe. You don't want to lower the tire pressure of the fronts from a totally acceptable pressure to something too low and have some unreasonable handling characteristics and cause problems at 100 miles an hour. Now, as an interesting aside, if you've got a car that is reacting what seems to be excessively slow, you could come up on the tire pressure, within reason, of course, and actually get the car to react a little bit faster. Now, radial tires, radial slicks, have been known to react quicker than bias plies. Part of that has to do with the sidewall construction and the way that they work. Think about a bias ply slick to a stiff sidewall slick could offer some improvement on rollout time or reaction time if you need it. And then you can even go a step further to a radial slick, and those are supposed to react even faster. The next thing I should have done is possibly changed my launch RPM. By going up or down an RPM will have a similar relative effect to the reaction time in the rollout. If you go up on RPM, you'll have the effect of making the car react a little bit quicker as it's closer to where the converter stalls. Whereas if you lower the launch RPM, it'll react a little bit slower. Now, launch RPM is kind of one of those last ones that would be possibly worth touching because it's only going to be worth a handful of thousandths of a second at this point. There's other things like the front shock, front tire pressure, and rear tire pressure that would likely have more of an effect than launch RPM. But don't discount launch RPM when you're trying to get that last little bit dialed in. And also, it pays to know what kind of RPM your car can tolerate launching at. For example, I tend to launch mine what would be considered relatively low at about 1900 RPM. I know that above 2000, this car is an absolute animal and reacts like nobody's business. But I also know that I can't really go below 1800 RPM because the way the car acts, it just doesn't. It tends to intermittently cough. There's something that happens below 1800 RPM. It just doesn't have the ability to launch at that low of an RPM. So make sure you know what your car can handle, what it's capable of, so that way you don't go beyond those limits when you're fine-tuning that launch RPM. So we've talked about some of the fine-tuning adjustments that can move your RPM. Now, it's worth noting that not any combination of all those would have moved me from my 40 to 60 thousandths red to being green. I need something a little bit more drastic. One of the guys I was racing with asked the question, hey, how tall are the front tires on your car? I said, I really don't know. I do know they're not that tall. Turns out my tires are 23.5 inches tall as they sit. And asking around and paying attention in the staging lanes, 26 was not uncommon. 27-inch tall tires were getting common, and there were a lot that were 27, 28-inch tall tires. There were a couple of 29-inch tall tires. Now, what the heck does tire height have to do with this? Well, tire height can actually lengthen the rollout. You're going from a short, stumpy little thing like this nearly 24-inch tall tire to a 28-inch tall tire that increases the rollout by a significant amount. So going from a short tire like this to a tall tire like this, now granted this is an exaggeration of course, but you can see that there is a much greater distance that this tire has to travel before it leaves the beams. Let me adjust my beams here a little bit. Whereas this little guy, it doesn't go near as far or take near as long to leave the stage beams. So you can see why going to a taller tire, even in this exaggerated setup, could actually slow down the rollout because it just simply takes longer for the car to leave the beams. Now, using my mid 12-second car on the 170/60 foot time, Working with AI, we came to some conclusions that basically going up to a 25-inch tall tire would be worth about 15 to 18 thousandths of a second. A 26-inch tall tire could trim about 30 thousandths of a second, and a 28-inch tall tire could be worth about 54 thousandths of a second. Going up to a 29-inch tall tire could be worth about 65 thousandths of a second. Yes, those are very small things, and we're still playing with thousands of a second. But remember, drag racing and bracket racing specifically is a game of very small margins. Those thousandths of a second add up. I'm not going to put big old monster truck tires on my El Camino, but I am going to go something a little bit taller. For me, I think that 28 to 29 inch tall range, maybe 28 and a half if I can find the right tire, is going to be the right way to go. Now they make front runners and that are 15 by 4.5 inch wide rims that have a tire that is appropriately sized. Now, I've got 15 by 7s on the nose of this car because at the time I bought those rims, I was going to be driving the car on the street a lot more, and a 15 by 7 just makes sense. Now, it's not in my budget to go to a front runner 15 by 4.5, so what I am going to do is go from that 205/60 to go up to like a 235/75, something that's a good bit taller. And I think the way that I naturally work, the way that I naturally want to hit the tree, I think that's going to put me at a very lethal combination of just on the green side by about 10 thousandths of a second. That's a really good place to be. Now, what if the car is actually a little bit slower than that reacting? That's fine, because it's a lot more consistent to push on the tree and go a little bit further on the reaction time and try and, tighten it up. That's a lot more consistent than trying to relax and lay it back. And that puts me in an extremely consistent place to launch this car. The last thing I can suggest is once you have things set up is to spend some time practicing. Once you've got a good idea of where the rollout's going to be, set that up on your practice tree and get to work. Realistically, these are all changes that can be made, and if you've got friends that have different size tires and a good test and tune day, don't be afraid to try a few things and figure out what works best for you. I want to hear from you guys. Have you had trouble with your car going red? What was the fix? Anyways, thanks for watching, and if you like this video, check this one out over here. You'll like that one too, I'm sure.